How's it going, Eliminators? On today's episode 2 of EP Tech Tips, I'll be showing you why you want to keep your fuel can clean and free of debris. So let's get right into it. Cub Cadet here I'm working on with a Kohler engine, and check out the fuel filter. All those chunks in there, that's all debris, nasty. So I'm draining the fuel line here into a jar and it's barely coming out. So my customer said he'd fire it up, it would run on choke, and then as soon as he took it off choke, it would only run for a little bit and then it would shut off. It's just a fuel starvation issue. Now, taking off the fuel cap here, if we have a look inside of the tank, it's going to be hard to see, but there's all kinds of bugs in there, and there's your main pickup spot somewhere in the center there. I'm probably missing it, but your carburetor is going to try to pull fuel from the tank, and what's going to happen is that little spider that's floating around in there is going to clog that hole, causing fuel starvation. And that all starts with the tank, which all starts with your jerry can. So if you're putting old stuff inside of your jerry can and you got all kinds of debris in the bottom of it, when your jerry can gets low, people tilt them right up and all that debris goes in here. So to limit that, you want to be using like a coffee filter, or even use some kind of kitchen strainer and strain your fuel, make sure there's no debris in it, and then you'll know that you'll have a clean fuel tank. You can go ahead and replace your fuel filter, and this should solve the issue. But I'm still going to go ahead and pull the bowl on the carburetor just to make sure there isn't a piece of debris floating around in there, because I've also seen pieces of debris inside of the bowl that float around and then they get sucked into the distribution tube in the main jet and they clog the main jet. And then after letting the machine sit, gravity pulls that little piece of gunk down and you can fire your machine back up again, and then like 5 or 10 minutes later it'll clog again. So we're doing a fuel system flush here, and it's going to start with draining the fuel from the tank. Once I pull that fuel filter off, the fuel should flow at a steady rate, and then I'll go ahead and flush this, blow out the line, change the fuel filter, go ahead and clean the carburetor, and it should run perfectly after that. So if we notice, there is fuel in the bottom of that tank. I have the fuel cap off to ensure that there's no vapor lock, and what I mean by that is a clogged vent on your gas cap will prevent air from going into your fuel tank. So what's going to happen is, let's say there's 50% fuel in your tank. That means there's 50% air as well. And as soon as you use 10% of that fuel, so let's say the fuel goes down to 40%, you're going to need to replace that 10% of fuel with 10% of air. And the only way that air can get into the tank is by a vent or a cap right there. And we can see that even with the fuel filter off, the fuel is draining at a slow rate, which means that the blockage is higher than where the fuel filter was. So I'm going to back purge this line. There's going to be a bubble inside of the tank, and then I should see a constant flow of fuel through this line here. So I'm just using my compressor now to back purge the line, so you can hear the fuel bubbling in there. And now the fuel is draining out at a fast rate, which means it was just a clogged line. So the fuel tank is now clean, except for some of the little spider legs and whatnot, but they're small enough that they can go through the fuel line, and they will get trapped in my new paper filter, fuel filter that we have here. Now, the way that we got all of the debris out of the tank without having to remove the tank is I used my little air gun here, put it to about 150 PSI, because you're gonna need quite a bit. And you're gonna go in and you're gonna aim more or less at the top. And what that's gonna do is it's gonna push air along the top, it's gonna hit the backside, and it's gonna push the rest of the air along the bottom, and it's gonna push all the debris right to the front where you can go in and pick it all up. And then what we use here is a telescoping magnet, so this extends, and we put a little bit of Gorilla Tape on the end of this, and we go into the tank and we stick all of the debris, the big parts that we can get right at the fuel inlet. We pull it out, and then the tank is clean without having to remove it. So I've gone ahead and pulled the bowl off of the carburetor here. You're going to notice that there is the distribution tube there, but it appears to be missing the main jet. But on this design of carburetor, the main jet is on the side. So everything inside of here looks fairly clean. The bowl has a little bit of sediment in it, whatever passed through that paper filter. Hard to believe, but this is what got through. I also went ahead and turned the key with the brake on, and I could hear this fuel shut-off solenoid popping up and down, so I know that works. So I'm going to go ahead and put this back together, fire it up, see how it runs. Okay, so we'll go ahead and fire up the machine. So now that the riding mower is running, we're gonna wanna prevent that from happening again. So we're gonna come over to the jerry can here, and with the cap off, we can see in the bottom here that we do have some debris in the bottom of our fuel can. Now, if it's large, coarse debris that's in there, you can probably just use a normal stainless steel screen kitchen strainer, and you could go ahead and transfer your fuel to another tank and just strain it out. But if you have some finer debris that's settled in the bottom, maybe some sand if you live near a beach or something like that, I don't know, then you might want to use a funnel and put a coffee filter into it. And then you can take this, put it into another jerry can, like I said, transfer that fuel into this one. It'll take a lot longer if you're filtering it through a coffee filter, but it will filter the finer debris. Then you won't have to go to hazardous waste and get rid of like 20 liters of fuel just because there's a little bit of debris at the bottom. But with that being said, that's going to wrap up today's episode 2 of EP Tech Tips. If you guys enjoyed the video, think about leaving me a thumbs up. You know, it really helps me out. You can click here to subscribe and click over here to watch one of my previous videos. I upload every single week, so be sure to stop on by next week, check the channel out for new content. And as always, guys, thanks for watching.